Okay, welcome to week 4. This is the Wednesday of this study. We have 7 lessons. This is the 4th one, so this is hump day for this book. In your chalice insert this week, at least in the digital one, it's been fixed for the one that Carol printed this morning. It says except for the coffee of 2 kinds. The breakfast items are going to be on sabbatical. And it says in the one until October, which means that but that's not true. They're going to be on sabbatical through October, or for October. But we will still have coffee. Yep, we'll still have coffee.
And water.
And water, yeah, there you go. So, just to make you aware of that, and that's the public service announcement for that. All right, let's get started. Chapter 4. 4th sentence. David, take a big jump here. The 4th sentence is, the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people. And that's, of course, we know that that's David. Now, Dr. Wright starts with a quotation from Luke, the God, and this is a sermon that Paul preached in the city in Antioch, in which Dr. Wright says that Paul would have been far better at the Old Testament in 7 sentences. I don't know. After reading Romans, I don't really think 7 sentences. I don't think would quite cut it for Paul. But I remember the story of poor Eutychus when Paul preached all night, and the poor kid fell asleep, fell out the window. I mean, that's good preaching right there. But here is the account of it here from Acts. Paul preaching. He says, the God of the people of Israel chose our ancestors. He made the people prosper during their stay in Egypt with mighty power. He led them out of that country, so forth and so on. And he gives us the history, overthrowing of 7 nations in Canaan. God gave them judges until the time of Samuel. Then the people asked for a king. He gave them Saul, who was tall, son of Kish, of the tribe of Benjamin, who ruled 40 years. And after removing Saul, he made David their king. And then God says, I have found David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. He will do everything I want him to do. And so forth and so on. And then here's the sequence. And this is basically, if you start reading your Old Testament at the very beginning, here you go. Abraham, Genesis 12, our ancestors, to the Exodus, to the wilderness wanderings, into the land, to the time of the judges, to the monarchy, and then ultimately it all leads to David, right? Mm-hmm. And we learn in this sermon that David is the man after God's own heart. Okay, so is there anything on this first couple of pages? Carol, you're usually the one I fall upon for these highlighting stuff.
Yeah, on page 73, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 6 sentences down the end.
Next page, okay.
No, on page 72, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
The fact that Paul makes this direct link from David to Christ is very important.
Yep.
A little later in his sermon, Paul claims that Jesus of Nazareth is the promised son of David, the Messiah. But unlike David, who dies and is buried, period, Jesus dies and is buried and is raised to life in glorious resurrection. Because of his resurrection, Jesus is the one to whom the words first spoken to David truly apply. Mm-hmm. You are my son today, I have become your father. Jesus is the one who will be the true king, not only over Israel, but over all nations on earth, as the very next verse of Psalm 2 declares. Ask me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. Mm-hmm. Jesus, risen son of David, is Lord and King of all creation.
Okay. So we get it, right? We've moved forward. David is God's man after his own heart, which ultimately is going to be Jesus, who is truly the man after God's own heart. But more on that a little bit later. Now he does say on page 73 the reason for choosing, another reason for choosing David for the fourth sentence is it's good to follow the example of Paul, of course, but the sequence of covenants. You've got the Noahic covenant, then the Abrahamic covenant, then Moses, Sinai. Now we come to the next most important covenant in the Bible, God's covenant with David. Okay, sometimes called the Davidic covenant. And we get, you can look at 2 Samuel 7 for that. It's God's promise that a son of David will always reign over the people of Israel. But we know we're a long way from that, as we've been looking through this book, because we've got a long line of kings that follow David, and with two exceptions, only two exceptions, they are rotten to the core. Absolutely just not good. And in the second half of the year, in yearly Bible reading plans, your reading turns toward Solomon and ultimately on to his descendants, and they're just, it's bad times for both the north and the south there in Israel. So, but all of this, the Davidic covenant, it makes what Dr. Wright calls a strong contrast with what goes on before David turns up. The depressing centuries of Israel's early life in the land of Canaan, the repeated unfaithfulness of the people, the chaos and anarchy of the era of the judges, and especially the tragic failure of the first king Saul. And now, if you put this sentence against that, it just, bing, there is hope, right? That there will be a man after God's own heart. Okay? Now, but what I like what Dr. Wright does here. He then takes us through it. He walks us through and starts. We're going with Israel from Sinai to Solomon, page 74. All right, and he starts with the tabernacle, and you see in the illustration on page 75 exactly what that would have, not exactly, but you see the shape of it. And you see the outer courtyard. He goes through a lot of descriptions here for the tabernacle. Was there anything in the tabernacle section that stood out to you? He breaks it down to it's God's dwelling place, because that's what a lot of people say. I can't stand reading that particular part of the Bible because, what does this have to do with Jesus? Well, actually, it has a lot to do with Jesus. And it has a lot to do with the New Covenant. It's God's dwelling place, right? It's where God's glory will dwell. I think he even mentions the Gospel of John. Jesus is talking to the religious leaders who are incensed about him clearing out the temple. And destroy this temple, and I will raise it in 3 days. So the place where God's glory dwelt was Jesus, but here with the Israelites on the move, it was the tabernacle. And today is Yom Kippur, at least for the next few hours. It started last night at sundown, which is the Day of Atonement for the Jews. Where exactly in this tabernacle would God's presence be found? In the Holy of Holies. If you go back to page 75 there, in the very back, and who was allowed to see it?
Only the high priest.
And how many days of the year was he allowed to do it?
One.
Today, yeah. Yom Kippur.
And he tied a rope on his leg, didn't
He had bells on too, yeah.
In case
Right.
he was not accepted.
Yeah. In case something happened in there.
Get him back out.
If you go to Anglican worship,
Get the body out.
Anglo-Catholic worship, they still observe the bells, and a lot of that altar worship is set up like this. A lot of that,
When God entered the Holy of Holies, he came in like a cloud.
Mhm.
So didn't the people of Israel see the cloud descending onto the Holy of Holies? But the priest was the only one that could go in there and sacrifice.
There was something different. There was something different from the cloud into the Holy of Holies, because when Moses would go in, he would go in. Well, Moses went before the priest, and he was from the tribe of Levi, so that'll work. He went in to meet with God, and he would take the veil off, and his face would shine. And it was so bright, the encounter with God, he had to wear a veil in front of the people. So there was something different inside of the Holy of Holies than necessarily just the cloud. But yeah, the cloud may have been for the protection of the people. But it really was a reminder that God was with them. So yeah, so God's dwelling place, that's good. The next would have been for priests and sacrifice, and this is where everybody gets bogged down with all the different sacrifices. If you look with me on page 78, I like how he laid them out. He tells us exactly what these are all about. The burnt offering, the grain offering. It's the middle of page 78. The burnt offering, the grain offering, the fellowship offering, sin offering, and the guilt offering. And the commonest, he says, at the very bottom of the page, first sentence of the last paragraph, were burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Yes, Jan?
I have trouble with that because I would think that the sin offerings and the guilt offerings would be more common as people came to confess their sins or assuage their guilt. Okay, that's my thought.
Okay, all right. Let's see if he gives reasonings for this. It impresses on the people that although Yahweh is their God and wants to dwell in the midst of his people and maintain a loving and protective relationship with them, Yahweh is utterly holy, cannot be approached lightly by sinful people. Sin and uncleanness have to be dealt with and atoned for before people can come into God's presence and worship and thanksgiving. So we go back up and we look at what the burnt offering is for. The sacrificial animal is wholly consumed on the altar. The sacrifice is offered both in relation to atonement, there's your for wrongdoing, and in thanksgiving and worship generally. And then the fellowship offering, the third one, the meat of the sacrificed animal is shared both as a happy feast for the worshipers. It just all sounds delicious, doesn't it? And as a source of food for the priests. This expresses renewed fellowship between the worshiper and their family and God.
Which is why I'm still going back to thinking that the sin offering and the guilt offering would be more common than the communal burnt offerings.
Burnt offering.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's very much worth thinking about. Yeah.
Burnt offering covered all of them.
Yeah, I know.
I was gonna say, aren't they all burnt?
Yeah.
Yes, they
And the
are.
burnt offering completely consumed though.
Mhm.
Well, then why have sin offering and guilt offerings?
I don't know. Let's ask Yahweh. Yeah.
But it says burnt and fellowship offerings.
So keep going down.
All right. Yep.
After that, there's the sin offering and the guilt offering.
No, this is
Yes, but he
Yeah,
says there
right.
that they are the commonest.
Right.
And I'm just saying that
Yeah,
I
it's a good
need
point.
to, I've made my thoughts
No,
clear.
it's worth,
We're
it's,
done.
no, seriously, it's worth thinking about. Yeah, I'll do some digging on that. Absolutely. I love that. Now, so we get from the tabernacle to the wilderness. And a lot of people don't realize how long Israel stayed at Sinai. They were there for 2 years. 2 years, right? But then they set off toward the land God had promised them. We're off to the promised land, right? And in the promised land, Carol, it's gonna be so grand, we'll have our fill from the grill as much as we can stand. It'll be so great, oh, we can hardly wait, because we're going to the promised land. That's right. For years, I've eaten nothing but manna, a dish that is tasty but bland. You know, but now we're on our way. I'll have a cheese souffle because we're going to the promised land. That's right. I can keep going. VeggieTales is imprinted.
I was gonna say, when is this
VeggieTales,
coming
these
from?
songs are imprinted upon me. Trust me. Yeah. But no, they're on their way, and they're there at Kadesh Barnea at an oasis. You know the story. Moses sends out 12 spies, and 2 of them come back and say, "Let's go." They got outvoted, big time. The other 10 say, "Don't think so." And you know what happens? The morale of the people, it fails, and they refuse to trust God to go with them and defeat their enemies like he said he would, and they rebel against Moses and will not go up into the land. But it's worth also reading Moses' recollection and interpretation of the tragic event in Deuteronomy 1 in 19 through 46, serving as kind of a commentary on these events. Now, we know that after they refused to go up, then they decided, we're going to go up. And Moses says, yeah, God's not going to, no, that's not how this is going to work. God, and they went up into battle, and they didn't fare all that well. See? The result is that all the people who have come out of Egypt stay in the wilderness for the next 38 years until almost all of them die. And it's the next generation that eventually crosses the Jordan. And that era in the wilderness is filled with both negative and positive memories for Israel, right? You've read the stories. If you haven't, dig into them. Grumble, 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 and rebellion. At one point they say, we don't have any food, and we hate this loathsome food. And they're confused. Do you have food or not? They had the manna, and they were tired of that manna. They were tired of manna. They were tired of God providing for them every single day. And so God gets a little bit upset with them. But on the other hand, look at it both ways. In the wilderness, they experience the astounding grace of God. He leads them and feeds them and waters them. He protects them from their enemies and from those who want to curse them. Remember Balaam? Yeah. And he says, king hires him and he can't curse him. Every word out of his mouth is blessing, right? I think he really did want to curse him because I think the money was pretty good from the king. But he spares them even when they make him angry enough to destroy them. And a couple of those stories are Exodus 16 through 17 and Numbers 11, 22 through 25. But it's easier if and I'm not going to take the time, you've already read it. Deuteronomy 8, it's easier to read the summaries in Deuteronomy. This is something that Israel is told to remember forever as a profound learning experience that should influence the way they will live in the land. But as you know, they forget. They forget, right? All right, so they're in the wilderness for 40 years or 38 years. Almost all of them die in the first generation, and now we're ready for the land. And we get the book of Joshua. And here is where we come to that.
Can I say something?
You cannot.
Okay.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
That last sentence just before the land of Canaan.
Go ahead.
I found those verses in Deuteronomy, however, clearly make a deep impression on the Lord Jesus Christ during his 40 days in the wilderness. I'd not thought about that, but I liked reading that, during which he determines as the Son of God to obey where Israel disobeyed and to be faithful to his Father's will where they had been unfaithful and rebellious. But just that phrase made a deep impression on the Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and if you go back up into that quote, you see one of the quotes Jesus uses. That you don't live on bread. Man doesn't live on bread alone.
Oh, yeah.
But on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. That's right.
That's a good point.
Yeah, he quotes that. Right.
Sorry,
good.
but I just...
No, that was great. Because it's bad news, I just got nothing but bad news right at the next stop. Jan.
This is something that I celebrate every Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
When Jesus was baptized, let me take that back. In Leviticus, I think it's chapter 16, they're talking about the Day of Atonement.
Yes.
And the goat that carries, who is the scapegoat, gets driven out into the desert to meet with the devil. Whereas after his baptism, Jesus, by the Holy Spirit, is driven out into the desert.
That's right.
To meet with the devil.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. That's great. It's another good comparison. Yeah, absolutely. See, you should read the Old Testament. I think if you pressed Andy Stanley on it, he'd say you should, but, unhitched.
Andy Stanley probably knows the Old Testament back and forth. so, you know, he carries it with him, whether he likes it or not.
Yeah.
Wait, just because he's read it back and
Uh-oh.
forth doesn't mean he knows
I
it.
mentioned his name.
So there,
I mentioned he
me.
has a gray hairpiece. Anyway, the hairpiece up here looks astounding.
Andy Stanley's wearing a hairpiece? Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's what he said.
What did he say?
I guess I haven't seen him lately.
You're on.
Well, no, he's been, it for years. He's got the really, you know, he better.
I'm
got-
missing
He's
the
the
conversation.
one
So
where
why
they
don't you
implanted
wear
the
it,
hair.
please?
Hair
He's got,
implants.
yeah, it looks natural.
My cousin
does.
did that,
I
but
didn't think it was
didn't last.
With the money he makes, it better. But
Yeah,
anyway,
seriously.
all right, land of Canaan. Oh, here they come. Interesting comments here at the bottom of page 81. The book of Joshua is clearly not a typical portrayal of some epic conquest in which one side is glorified and the other demonized. The hero is not Israel, not even Joshua, but God himself. The question is not whose side is God on, but rather who is on the Lord's side. We need to always keep in mind that Israel exists to serve the purpose of God, not the other way around. Now, I could take my name and put into that sentence. I need to remember that I exist to serve the purpose of God, not the other way around.
Mhm.
When Israel steps outside that purpose, they feel God's wrath. Conversely, when others align themselves with God's purpose, they meet his mercy regardless of who they are. And we see this right away. You go over to page, and we'll get to the genocide, but page 83,
Mhm.
you see it. The first Canaanite, you know, we're supposed to drive out and exterminate all the Canaanites, and but the first Canaanite we meet in the book is Rahab. And her profession of faith in the God of Israel gives her protection. Even James comments on it in the New Testament. Is she exceptional, or are there others who similarly come over to the Lord's side? I tend to think that she was held out as an example, but probably not the only one who
Yeah.
came over to the Lord's side. Yep.
According to the Bible, they said, told Rahab to get in her room and bring all of her family with her. So she
Yep.
basically, because she believed, saved her whole family, so that had to be more than one.
And then in the story of Achan, we meet an Israelite who disobeys God and is effectively treated like a Canaanite. He is expelled and executed. And you can read about that if you want in Joshua 7. He took some of the booty. There, I got another chance to use that word. He took some of the booty, and he wasn't supposed to. And God's instructions were clear. Kill him. Just, that's it. And he's an Israelite. So again, you know, remember when Joshua asks the angel of the Lord, or whose side are you on? Are you on our side? Was what Joshua said. And the angel of the Lord said, no. Isn't that something? We just tend to gloss that over. He's on God's side. You know, I'm not on your side. I'm on God's side. All right. And there's a difference there. All right.
That last sentence
Go ahead, please.
Just above
Yeah.
tribes and judges.
Right.
Israel is learning that God's door is open to foreigners who turn to him, and learning at the same time that merely being an Israelite by birth and tribal identity is no guarantee of salvation if one falls into lies, deceit, and disobedience.
I hear echoes of God could raise up children for Abraham from these stones. Yeah, that's good. All right, okay, before we get to tribes and judges, let's discuss the elephant in the room here. I like how he handled this, the genocide portion, in that excursus on page 82. What were your thoughts about it? Because we all know they did not drive all the people out of the land,
Right.
clearly. They didn't, okay? But what'd you think about how he handled it? It's not easy. You didn't think
I
about it
thought
much at all, huh?
Obviously,
Well, it's an exercise of God's moral judgment.
Yeah, it's a limited military event. That's what we gotta understand. Confined to a single generation. Most of the other wars in the Old Testament were not commanded by God. They just weren't. And some were condemned. They were. There was a rhetoric of warfare in the ancient world. We gotta get this in its context. There was a rhetoric of warfare that used graphic hyperbole, killing everything that breathed, doing that. Well, they didn't.
no.
They didn't kill everything that breathed, when the reality on the ground was known to be much less. We use the same kind of hyperbole in sport when we boast about our team annihilating the opposition. We know the word is exaggerated and not literal. Now, the book of Judges shows that the picture of total destruction in Joshua was in fact only partial. That we know of a story of some of the peoples realizing their time was short, and so they disguised themselves as travelers from far away and come up to Joshua, and the people got mad at Joshua about this, because how could you be fooled like that? But he had to honor his word to them, that he told them they would live. Now, they were conscripted to serve the Israelites, but we know that they were there, right? So then I want to take a look at this one here. What was attacked and destroyed were the small city forts. I think Hollywood doesn't do us any favors when we think about these times. What was attacked and destroyed? Small city forts with their kings and soldiers, military power of the Canaanites. Most of the ordinary population seem either to have moved out to the hills, or in some cases moved over to join the Israelites. Right? The Bible explains that God used the Israelites as agents of his judgment on the wickedness of the Canaanites by that time. This was not just random genocide and land grab, but the exercise, as you said, God's moral justice. And he's going to use this against Israel later. All right? By using their enemies as agents of judgment on them. In fact, he does so far more often against Israel than against the Canaanites. Don't forget that. Right? So the defeat of the Canaanite enemies is celebrated throughout the rest of the Old Testament as a righteous act of God, as part of the history of salvation. We cannot surgically cut it out as primitive violence. Neither Jesus nor any New Testament writer raises any question or embarrassment over this part of their scripture, and I think that's important. They didn't celebrate it either. They don't, oh, look at us, No, but they did. They weren't embarrassed by it. They weren't embarrassed by it. And I think that's important. And I've traveled a good ways back to the more traditional conservative side on reading the genocide stories. All right, tribes and judges. Now we're going to get into some good stuff. Y'all ready? Disunity. We still got a little ways before we get to the man after God's own heart, right?
Yep.
Disunity. Just full of terrible stuff, right? Anything in that? Disunity, disloyalty? Anything on those pages caught your eye that you'd like for the group to bandy about? No? Pretty much good. All right, y'all. This book, I got to get something that's a little more difficult.
No.
Yeah, yes, Sharon. The land. There's an excursus on the land. I think this is still important today. It was the land God gave, and it's the land that God still owns. I own my property. No, you don't. God does. Now, if you want to talk to him about it, you go right ahead. And I wish you luck in that. But I got papers. He says I made it. Yeah, that's a trump. That trumps. There you go. If you'll pardon the expression. It does. It trumps. But there's disloyalty. There you've got Baal or Baal, the name of the dominant god of Canaan. And what was Baal or Baal the god of? fertility, rain, you know?
Yep.
And you need that God on your side, right? Right? I mean,
No, procreation.
procreation. You know, to be frank, I like what he says here at the bottom of 85. To be frank, Baal is the God of everything that seems to matter. As for
Cows.
Yahweh, he's a pretty competent God to have in battle, as the history shows, and they will not abandon him altogether, they think. But for everyday practical life in the real world of living in this land, you know, it helps to have Baal on your side.
Was Baal always depicted as a cow, a calf, or whatever?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. That's the essence of, this is what's called syncretism. This is the mixing of the worship of the living God with the gods of the people around. This is an important paragraph.
I thought so too.
Before we blame the ancient Israelites, are modern Christians much different?
No.
On Sunday, sure, we worship the God we know through the Bible and Jesus, but for the rest of the week, our lives are easily governed by the idols of our surrounding culture. Success, money, status, technology, consumerism, celebrity, and so on. The Israelites find such a mixture as fundamentally disloyalty to their covenant God and Redeemer, and they're going to be paying for that later. Now, there is deliverance, though. You know, the cycle in Judges, the people sin, they're judged, they cry out, they're delivered. God raises up a judge. And did you notice something about a lot of these judges? They're not the best people. Did you notice that? God isn't raising up saints here. Well, some of them made it into the roll call in Hebrews, but he's not raising up perfect people here. He's just working with what he's got, you know, which is one of the most amazing things of God. He works with what he's got, and he's able to do amazing things. But I like the little bullet points under deliverance. The people are raised up by God. The judges are raised up by God. They're God's special agents. They carry out God's justice. And even Samson, Samson, oh boy. And then they act in the power of God's Spirit. I love that little line at the end of Samson's, but his hair started to grow back. So you know what's coming. I mean, you know that that's not the end of the story, right?
Right.
That's the Spirit. That's the Spirit acting in the power of God's Spirit. He cries out to God for one more burst, and we're told that he killed more Philistines in that right there than he did the rest of his life. And as I said, they become examples of faith. And one of them was a woman. Ladies, rejoice. Deborah. So
At least one of them.
What's that?
At least.
At least one of them. Yep, Rahab, Deborah. I mean, Rahab wasn't a judge, but you see, there's some ladies in here getting some time. All right, there you go. Not much, but all right.
I like that, lad. Some of them are very unsavory characters who do strange things, but they respond to God's call in trust and obedience, even against the odds. That is what faith means.
There you go.
Yep.
And they did. They'd rather, however imperfectly, they did it. All right. All right, we're getting close. Y'all hang in there. Oh, we're doing great. Have you ever thought of Samuel as a king? He really was. Now, even though he would not take that title, he really was. He had leadership qualities. He was a prophet, of course, but he was kind of the first. But Saul, we know, is the first. You had the Philistines were always raiding into the Israelites' areas, right? And they wanted to be like the nations around them. See, here we go again. Well, we want Yahweh, but we want Yahweh and. We want God, we want Jesus, but we want Jesus and. And when we attempt to add anything to Jesus, it doesn't work out. It simply doesn't. That's syncretism. That adding of Jesus to other things. It's almost as if we believe that God's kingdom won't come unless certain certain allegiances and other things it's dangerous. The Israelites tried it, and guess what? It didn't work. Now, but the Philistines are there, and then finally the people say, look, Sam, we love you, we appreciate you, but we need a king. And it breaks Samuel's heart. Because
And God's.
God's, because God is their king. We say, oh, we know that God is our king. We know, but we want a king we can touch and see. We want to be like the other nations. And so God says, okay, but I want you to tell them what it's going to be like. And they didn't even care. They said, that's fine. Oh, don't worry about it. We want a king. And so God gives them one. Saul, tall guy. Handsome, tall, looks good on the billboard, looks good in the publicity on the TV, looks great. And I think he started off really, really well. He hid. He didn't want to be the king. He didn't ask for this. He was hiding. Samuel couldn't find him. Where is he? He's hiding in the luggage because he really did not want to be king. But when you get a taste of that kind of power, it draws you in. And he accepts. And I agree with Dr. Wright. He is one of the most tragic figures in the Bible. The very last story of his life, he's going to a medium to call up Samuel, to tell him what to do, because God won't answer him. How absolutely horrible
Yeah.
that must have been for him.
Yep.
Before say, well, he deserved it. Well, it had to have been absolutely horrible. But what happened to Saul, at least for me, is that Saul worried more about what the people thought than honoring God. And this is nowhere better displayed than when Samuel is late to offer a sacrifice. And it gets to that last day, and the Bible tells us that the people are starting to leave. And Samuel says, oh, we can't have that. I gotta have the, and I gotta have the people. We gotta keep the morale strong. Gotta have them with me. And so he offers the sacrifice. And at the moment he offers the sacrifice, wouldn't you know it, Samuel shows up. What are you doing? And I didn't think you were coming, and the people were leaving. And that's it.
No trust.
And he lost God there. He lost him. It's a story of losing the Lord. And he lost him. God left him. And not only did God leave him, but the story tells us that God sent a spirit to torment him. Wow. So it's bad enough that God leaves you, right? But then he sends a spirit to torment you. And the little boy or little man, or the man who comforting him, David on his lyre, singing his psalms, and it would bring Saul comfort. And he would be able to get some rest. But in that last horrible incident, Samuel tells him, yeah, tomorrow you and your sons are going to be with me in the abode of the dead, Hades or Sheol. And sure enough, it happens. So Saul. Is there anything about Saul that anything that caught your eye that you may not have known about him? Now, we do know that the Apostle Paul, we know because he told us, he is named after Saul, tribe of Benjamin, same as Saul, son of Kish. So, and he was proud of it. Read Galatians. I'm a Hebrew of Hebrews from the tribe of Benjamin, and yeah, first king, yeah, and then we come to David. Is there anything we need to say about David that we haven't said already? He could have killed Saul twice, but he would not put his hand against the Lord's anointed, and he wouldn't allow anybody else to do it either. He was a really, I think he was a reflective, worshiping king, and it started off really well. But it didn't take long. Didn't take long before he has descended into the chaos which envelops it. But he does provide Solomon plans to build the temple. So we call it Solomon's temple because he's the one that actually built it. But the plans were David's. Because he had wanted to build it, but you remember why God wouldn't let him do that?
Sin.
Yeah, too much blood on your hands, too much, you're a man of blood. And whether that be his opponents or from his own family, you just, if you pay attention when you're reading after the sin of David and Bathsheba and the murder of Uriah the Hittite, it's downhill. And we just crossed First Kings chapter 2, right?
Yeah.
Where he leaves Solomon a hit list. He does. He says, now listen, you need to take Joab out, and you need to take the sons of Zeruiah out. You need to take these folks out. Don't let their gray heads go down to the Hades in peace. Don't do it. It's a sad scene. He had how many wives? He didn't have as many as Solomon had, but he had several. None of them could come and warm him up in his old age. So he had to have Abishag the Shunammite come and be with him. And how must that have made his wives feel? Just not. But after that, Solomon, he settles down quick, doesn't he? He's a wise man. Hey, Solomon asked God for wisdom. He didn't ask for the lottery. He didn't ask for it. He asked God for wisdom. And God said, oh, since you've asked for that, I'm going to give you that, and I'm going to give you all this other stuff too. But he did the three things God said, don't do. And it was to collect wives, and to collect horses, and there was one other. And money. I'm going to make you rich, but don't set your hopes on all of that. But you know what ended up happening to him, right? The wives from the political alliances that he was making with other nations, and part of that was he would marry into them. It was a common practice. They would bring their gods. And so Solomon basically stopped worshiping Yahweh. He basically stopped worshiping Yahweh and worshiped the other gods to appease his wives, I guess. But anyway, Solomon, he antagonizes the northern tribes. They don't like being ruled by the arrogant tribe of Judah. And this is the beginnings of the split, right? But because I want to focus on this, of course, it's the last section. But the Davidic covenant, I really appreciate how Dr. Wright takes us through all of that history and shows how it's connected. But he takes us back to the Davidic covenant. Because despite how things are going, at least through Solomon, right? And it's not going well, right? Look with me at page 92 at the shortly after Solomon's death. In 930 BC, the anger of the northern tribes at the oppressive policies of the Jerusalem court boils over. They rebel against Solomon's son after he gets some really bad advice, Rehoboam, and they split off to form a separate kingdom in the north, the kingdom of Israel, in distinction from the kingdom of Judah in the south. God's people are divided and the wounds go deep. So it only took two kings, two and a quarter kings for the united monarchy, or three. That is, kingship over all the tribes. It lasted about 1 century, 100 years. And that was it. The man after God's own heart played his part in his own generation, but his own sins and the increasing sins of the people produced one series of disasters after another, right? But in the midst of all of that, we have grace.
Yes.
And it's to be found in the Davidic covenant. All right? So I'm going to turn this over. Carol, you got some highlighting going on over there?
Not,
No, you just didn't.
not on this page. I mean, it was all
Okay.
good, but I didn't highlight.
Have you ever looked at the actual components of the promise? That, like, he lays it out here in 93? You know, one of David's descendants will be king over Israel continuously into the future, right?
Jesus.
Yeah, well, the first is Solomon. The sons of David, who will be kings over Israel, will be regarded as sons of God, which does not mean they're divine, but that God will take them into a relationship with himself like father and son. You are my son, today I have begotten you, that kind of thing. That father-son relationship includes reciprocal love of God and obedience of the king with the threat of punishment, just like the covenant with Israel. So the Davidic king is still accountable to God for keeping God's law. In that sense, the covenant with David does not replace the Sinai covenant, but rather puts the king under the same obligations as the rest of the people. Yahweh is still Israel's true king, and Israel's human king, like the people he rules over, must obey Yahweh. And David's house and kingdom will be forever. That means a son of David will rule over God's people forever. And it's an astounding promise that God makes. And we get one of the Psalms here, Psalm 132. We have several examples of David. He's chosen Jerusalem as his capital city and and he's going to provide the plans for his son, and it's all over these Psalms. But you know what happens? Complacency. The problem of complacency. The people are so aware of God's promise to the line of David, so sure that God has chosen Jerusalem as the place where he will dwell. They're so confident that God will always defend his city and temple that they fall into a complacent arrogance. God will never allow his city and temple to be destroyed, they think, no matter how the king and the people live. Well, centuries after David, Jeremiah has to warn them again. Yeah, they're just wicked. And God will keep his threats as well as his promises. And we're going to see that next week. And the second problem we have is the problem of failure. And we've talked about that. Almost every single one, with the exception of Hezekiah and Josiah. Now, I do want to point out that with Isaiah, and the prophecy, Isaiah 7:14, the young woman or the virgin will be with child, and his name will be called Emmanuel, which means God with us. There are some scholars who believe that at least one application you could make of that verse is Hezekiah, because it's very close to that time, Hezekiah's reign, and not to the exclusion of anything else, but just not to the exclusion of Jesus, obviously, but just in its day, that Hezekiah may have been who Isaiah had in mind. But Hezekiah and Josiah were the only ones, and they failed to live in obedience to God. Solomon passed that down. And the kings in the north, there's no hope there either. It starts with Jeroboam. Yep.
There was one thing that was interesting about the kings
Mhm.
after Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
Several of them did turn away from God, but they all came back before they died.
Mm.
They didn't always do everything that they should have to clear the land out, but they repented and came back to God before they died themselves.
No.
I thought that was fairly interesting.
It was interesting. Yep. But the great thing is on page 96. Even with these guys, and I love the honesty of the Psalm, Psalm 89. It ends with, Lord, where is your former great love, which is your faithfulness you swore to David? And I mean, I love that. But no, God has not forgotten his promise. There's no son of David reigning in Jerusalem anymore. In fact, there's no kingdom of Judah or kingdom of Israel anymore either. But God has not abandoned his promise to David. Rather, that promise is transformed, and we know all about that. And it's because of the great hope of Israel and its scriptures. And then we get just these beautiful passages from Isaiah, and all of a sudden it's Advent. For unto us a child is born. Right? And then we have a shoot will come up again from Isaiah, from the stump of Jesse, the father of David. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him. Wow. And then we have Jeremiah passage. The days are coming when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, a king who will reign wisely and do what is just and right in the land. Micah predicts the future king of Israel will be born in Bethlehem. You see it. It's all falling into place. That's the village from which David came, and his rule will extend to the ends of the earth. Now, of course, a lot of these passages you're going to be hearing a lot here in the next couple of months. Christians believe that Jesus fulfilled these prophecies. And so, where did we start? Paul emphasizes this at the beginning and end of Romans. At the heart of Paul's gospel is the affirmation that Jesus of Nazareth, crucified and risen, is the one through whom God has fulfilled his promise to Abraham and David. He is indeed great David's greater son. For that reason, King Jesus is the one who, by his resurrection, is now proclaimed as Lord and King. All right? Jesus himself claims this global authority. Matthew 28:18-20. All authority in heaven and on earth will be given to me when I come back. That's not what he said. Right. Has been given to me now. So, go and tell everybody. Make disciples of all nations, even Nichols people. Right, Donald? Yeah. That's right, all nations. Recognizing Jesus as Lord, it prepares the early church to suffer the wrath of those earthly rulers in the form of the Roman Empire and its demands for worship as Caesar is Lord. But Jesus, son of David, son of God, is the man after God's own heart. And so, ultimately, David is, I have found a man after my own heart, David. But we know what happens to him toward the end. He still loved the Lord. I mean, he did. He repented right away after the sin of Uriah and Bathsheba, that old sordid tale. But he did. He repented. He was a shell of himself, and his family was torn to pieces after that. Which Nathan told him that was going to happen. So next up, the fifth sentence, one of my faves. What does the Lord require of you? But to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. I like the turn this book takes here as we head into the Thursday chapter. We're going to do prophets. We're going to spend some time with the gospel, and then it closes out with Psalms and wisdom. So it really does help us. And one thing I don't know if you've noticed at the very beginning of the book, but I'm going to share this and then we're done. All of Chris Wright's royalties from this book have been irrevocably assigned to Langham Literature, which was formerly the Evangelical Literature Trust. Langham Literature is a program of Langham Partnership International, which John Stott founded. Chris Wright is the International Ministries Director, so he doesn't make a dime off this book. All of the proceeds go straight to missions work. So, and as a disciple of John Stott, that it doesn't surprise me. John Stott was a powerful preacher and a wonderful, wonderful writer. So, English, of course. I like those British guys. I don't know what to tell you. I like the Beatles. You know, I don't know. So, anyway.
Ha ha ha.
Oh, thanks, Donna. Yeah. All right. So next week, Lord willing, we'll be back to look at chapter 5. So any closing comments? Last call for coffee. You ain't got to go home, but you can't drink here. All right. So, hey, everybody that's going to be streaming this, thank you so much for streaming it, taking the time to dig into this. I'll upload the video a little bit later today. Again, thank you, Donna, for joining us. Thank you, everybody here in the room. Until next time.